Welcome to Screening Room, the show that shows you film creations by independent filmmakers and the creators themselves. I'm your host, Bernie Ebelhair. Over the past few weeks, we've been receiving a number of letters concerning our Lost Loop segment, which features our in-house continental filmmaker and film commentator, Tim Wilson. And I'd like to share some of that mail with you. The first letter comes from Howard Weinberg of Liverpool, New York. He writes, "The man is a buffoon, a bumbling idiot. His meaningless banter is about as stimulating as Mamie Eisenhower's left earlobe." Ms. Gidget Hull of Fulton writes, quote, "If I want to listen to someone blabber incoherently, I call on my 2-year-old. I don't need to turn on the idiot box and listen to Tim Wilson." The next letter comes from Ralph Spoilsport of Solvay. "Wilson's loop has been lost for 4 weeks now. How long does he take to repair? I suggest he find his loop as quickly as possible and be banished from TV." Finally, Tom Wace of Syracuse writes, "Although Lost Loops with Tim Wilson is offensive and foolish, I must admit it's quite physically stimulating. After watching last week's edition, I vomited my guts out." That's just a sample of our mail, both complimentary and uncomplimentary, about Lost Loops and Tim Wilson. Well, viewers, you better brace yourselves, because we've decided here on Screening Room that for our final edition, we're going to feature Tim and spend the entire half hour talking to him about his films. Well, to say the least, that should be very interesting. Tim? Tim?
I'm not a sure idea to come out with that kind of attractive audience out there, but let me try and defend myself. I came to Syracuse 15 years ago, and believe it or not, when I signed the contract to come here, I was in the loony bin, the madhouse, the mental institution, right? And my wife and I had long debates. I asked my favorite psychiatrist, should I come to Syracuse? He said, only make up your own mind. So it was my own decision, but I was in the madhouse when I made it. Let me read you something. The only thing my wife knew about Syracuse, my wife and I knew about Syracuse, A, was a man called Jim Brown, and B, was something called the Maxwell House, which has something to do with citizenship. So we picked up the Encyclopedia Britannica, 1902, 9th edition. American Revisions and Weekly. Syracuse, a city of the United States, the county seat of Onondaga County, New York. The Erie Canal, flowing east and west, joins the Oswego Canal within the city. Syracuse contains several handsome public buildings: the county courthouse, the United States government building, the city hall, and the state asylum for idiots. And with that kind of mail, I think maybe I'm in the right place.
Who knows? Seriously, how did you get into film?
I thought we dealt with that in the first, didn't we? It was an accident. Remember? The lady with the, well, I remember, you see. The lady with the red trousers and my friend who got me through economics at McGill.
And you were looking for people who were either homosexual or
communists or
communists.
queers. Yeah,
were they?
Oh, many of both, yes.
Communists.
In fact, I think I was both myself for a while, but I've reformed.
Does the National Film Board do that to you?
Oh, God. It's a fantastic place. It's a school. It's a state. It's another state asylum for idiots, right?
Does it have any connection to Syracuse University?
None, except the bus trip we make every March, spring break, for the last 3 years. We've been going up there, and they've been very good to us. In fact, Marshall Matlock designed a handsome plaque, which Syracuse University, the Newhouse School, presented to the Film Board and thanked them for their gracious hostmanship. And may I put in a plug here?
Well, no, you can't, because right now we're going to go to a commercial, and we'll be right back with Tim in a second.
Shop at Wiggins. Need a wig? Shop at Wiggins.
Isn't that the hard way to advertise?
I believe in advertising only to men who need wigs. My birds give me selective advertising.
And that's exactly what you get when you advertise in the Yellow Pages.
You can't beat my birds for finding customers.
But when you advertise in the Yellow Pages, you don't find customers, they find you.
And no birds?
It's like striking yellow. I mean gold.
In case I decide to, how do I advertise in the Yellow Pages?
Just phone the Yellow Pages office.
Say, how would you like to buy a bunch of very smart boat-billed herons?
Hi, we're back on Screening Room with Tim Wilson. The first film that Tim has brought along to show us is called A Rather Strange Tribe. I'm wondering, Tim, if you could sort of set the clip up for us before we roll it.
Well, it's the only film that's entirely my own work, except the camera work was done by the students. The only thing I never did at the film board was camera work, which is why at this State Asylum for Idiots I teach the basic cinematography course. You see the logical connection, because I never did camera work up there. I always had a cameraman. In this film, I wrote it, directed it, edited it, casted it, found the locations, produced it, advertised it, you name it. Actually, I'm ashamed to say I worked in it for about 2 years in between doing other jobs. The university was kind to let me do that. We've sold a few copies. At a conference on visual anthropology at Temple, it opened the conference. And I was asked, is it an ethnographic document? And my reply was, it's a fake. Yes, it's a fake ethnographic document. This was foreshadowing a new trend of films with no lies. Now it's becoming common to make fake academic documents. This was made a while ago. I looked around to cast a family. You know, I wanted a mother and father and the children getting up in the morning, as seen by a strange anthropologist, because I've always been a sort of marginal man, half outside and half inside any group I'm in. And after interviewing various people, I cast the Fensters. Now, Ruth Fenster is an actress. She's played Hello Dolly at the Landmark. She's been in Syracuse. She's in the Syracuse stage right now. This is her husband, and her 3 kids. The 4th kid was at college.
Now, was this shot here, or
Shot in DeWitt, right near Randolph Road and in the back of Lemoyne.
Okay. Well, without any further ado, then let me present A Rather Strange Tribe by Tim Wilson.
Njani ukuphila ngalezi nsuku kulamakhaza amaningi abaningi bahleze ezindlini, abanye njalo basimlilo, abanye njalo ngabazi ukuthi bayedinga ukudla abakwaziyo ukuthi zabakhudumeza. Kodwa ke lezi nsuku zamakhaza zinsuku ezifanele ukuthi sibe ndawonye. I'm an anthropologist. I study examine how people behave. They think are important. Often we concentrate on one, which is one family, putting them, as it were, under the microscope. We compare one with others who live nearby to see what is typical. Here is some film we made. Strange we have started. They live in this part of the world. And this is how it looks as they begin a typical day. Among these natives, each family usually has a house to itself for sleeping, eating, and bringing up their young.
You didn't get much of an idea of what we were going to see from Tim's work. Let's do. I guess I'll ask you some questions about it, and
tell you the story of the
sometimes
film.
when you get a chance to see the film, you can, well, whatever.
Get you yet.
A Rather Strange Tribe. What made you make it?
I'm fascinated with this idea of the marginal man, or being able to look at yourself and seeing what you do and comment on yourself, which comes from an idea of having insight, which goes back to 2 words called gnothi sioton, which translate know thyself, which were the motto over Plato's academy in Athens. Know thyself was the motto of all institutions. And the best way to know thyself is to see thyself through the eyes of somebody outside looking at you. So I picked this African anthropologist who was a graduate student in Maxwell. I paid him $50. I paid the Fensters $100 for the 3 kids, the 2 parents, for the whole weekend. One of the kids wanted to go skiing, and his mother said, you can't go. We promised Mr. Wilson the family for $100. It took a weekend to shoot at the house, and half a day in Upstate, because Upstate then had a color studio and this place didn't. And funny enough, the Africans told me it was ahead of its time because there was no color studio in Africa at that time. Now, of course, there are many.
It hasn't been shown in Africa.
I imagine it has. There's more demand from it from outside this country than inside. And when it was shown, somebody said an American could not have made that film, which is interesting because I am, of course, an American.
What was your specific purpose when you made the film? Were you trying to simply make a comment on American culture, or were you also trying to explore? I mean, if I'm not mistaken, you are originally from Canada.
No, I'm originally from Trinidad.
From Trinidad.
I went to school in England, college in Canada, and then worked at the Film Board in Canada and came here. Oh, in between, I went to Baghdad for 2 years and got married.
Do you tend to concentrate on ideas of cultural problems because you yourself have been somewhat
I think
displaced
so.
throughout your life?
I think so. It's a very astute observation. I'm interested in cross-cultural phenomena, and I think that's because when I went to England, I went to quite a good public school, of which this is a crest. You'll never get a, well, anyhow.
Well, let's
But I was a colonial. See, I was a second-class citizen.
let's talk one step further, since you've come from the National Film Board and your training there to America to teach, and obviously Canada is going through a strange period of adjustment with
Quebec
cultural
especially,
problems
yeah.
with Quebec, whatever, about cultural ties and who should control the film board, whatever. Do you feel very strange coming from a National Film Board background, teaching in America, when you yourself are somewhat Canadian?
Well, you see, I'm on my third citizenship. And if the good Lord grants me enough time to gain Russian and Chinese citizenship, I think if it was worth the effort, I would try. But frankly, I had this feeling when I came here I'd come to Syracuse to die, because we'd moved around so much. At some point, you have to put down roots. And if I may give you some advice, Bernie, the longer you live, the harder it is to put down roots, you know. You start changing jobs at the age of 55 or 60, it isn't easy.
So you were born in Trinidad,
I went to school in England.
school in England.
And if it hadn't been for the Second World War, I would have gone to Oxford on a scholarship. But I was back in Trinidad when the war broke out, so my family sent me to McGill.
And then after that, you
And you
went
see,
into the
I went to the Canadian Air Force.
Canadian Air Force, of
yeah.
which you won your wings without ever leaving the air.
Oh,
or
you
the
remember?
ground.
Oh,
It's
how
coming.
kind.
It's coming back to me now.
Why didn't you write a letter?
Why don't you give a little description of the film, since the audience never got to see it, of what sort of progresses
Well,
in the film? and
The
what you
idea
were trying
was
to do?
stolen. The idea was stolen from an article called the Nasseremus, and Nasseremus is simply Americans backwards. This article is a classic in the language of anthropology, and it describes the elaborate technique of dental care and so on. You know, instead of just taking a twig and brushing the ends and doing your teeth like this, you need all this fantastic dental equipment and automatic toothbrushes and so on, which are in the film, by the way. There's a little scene in the bathroom. And I'm trying to remember some of the lines of the commentary. These people put great emphasis on dress and different styles of dress, and the young learn from the old in dress and makeup. And each has its own private territory. In this country, kids all want to have their own room, you know. The little girl who's called Julie, like my little girl, she has her own room. And I had her make the bed. Of course, her mother laughed at that. She said, Julie never makes the bed. But I wanted the line, the child is encouraged to learn the care of private property, you see, which is very important. It's my Marxism coming out. The involvement of our children into capitalism begins at a very early age.
Have you returned to Trinidad or any of the countries where you had your initial, I guess, cultural upbringing, since you've come back and made films at the Film Board and come to America? And have you seen any distinct changes for the worst because of, let's say, influences from
America?
From America, wherever.
You want to? What I do sometimes is sing the two versions of Rum and Coca-Cola: the original version, which is bitterly anti-American, and the version sung by the Andrews Sisters, where the tune is the same, the words are quite different. And drinking rum and Coca-Cola, go down Point Cumana. The girls, they say that the Yankees nice. They say they give them a better price. I don't think the Andrews Sisters sang
No, I
that
don't.
version.
I doubt very highly that they did. Let me see. You said you went to McGill University.
And that was a poor second to me, you see. That was not...
Instead
McGill
of
is
I-
supposed to
instead
be
of
the
I-
Harvard of Canada or the Yale. To me it wasn't, because I had missed out on Oxford.
Did you have any distinct influences, either in teachers, instructors, of any?
I took one of everything. You've never heard of Stephen, you know, I say this, it's a pity, we've never heard of Stephen Leacock, who was something like the Woody Allen of Canada in those days, back in the 1900s. I had never heard of him. He was a teacher of economics at McGill and a very, very funny man. And my professor of economics was a student of Culleton. Culleton was a student of Leacock's. And when, during the war, they tried to draft Cullerton, the students rioted at McGill. We drafted Cullerton because he happened to be single, and most of the professors were married. They had a big sign, "Draft James, leave us Cullerton." James was the principal, who happened to be an American.
Oh.
So, in other words, students were rioting in those days too, but for different reasons.
Obviously different reasons. So then you completed all 4 years at McGill?
Yeah, no, 3 years, because I had a higher certificate from Oxford and Cambridge. And now McGill is 3 years. You go to a junior college in Quebec for your first year, and freshman English and all those courses you get over, and then you go to McGill.
So you had no actual film training in any form at
absolutely.
McGill at all?
No, I was a bookman.
So your first contact with film was with the
Yeah.
National Film Board? Or when you
Right,
supposedly
when
met all
I saw
the
those
communists
lousy
and
training films,
homo-
right. Yeah,
all
when I
right,
saw those
and-
lousy training films.
And
The
you
film board was a complete accident, complete accident.
after you had met these people or had talked to a friend and had lunch with them, how soon after that did you get into the film board?
Oh, God, in a couple of weeks, I guess. Something like that.
They had hired
It
you?
was
or
VE Day, which was in May, and Grierson was producing a film. He made a 10-minute short on victory in Europe in 48 hours, from the idea to the finished print. He did it, of course, without shooting anything except titles. He ransacked the library and cut out original negative. They never forgave him. He cut out original negative, did all kinds of things. Made a damn good little film. Oh, he had some original shooting on the celebrations, you know, the VE celebrations, Montreal, Quebec. You see, the Film Board's motto is to unite Canada and to let Canada see itself. We've come back to Gnothe Sioton again, know thyself.
The problem
And-
the problem now being the
And to show
situation
Canada
as
to
it's
the
going.
world.
In order for Canada to see itself, we're in a very
It's-
strange state because of the Quebec cinema and
Right.
the Quebecois.
It's got two selves. Canada's gone schizo.
Do you think that's healthy in terms of filmmaking or healthy in terms
Yes,
of Canada?
I think it is. I think Quebec should be independent.
You
I
do?
tell Mrs. Schulte that, and she gets most upset because she's a Pole, but you know that the dean and his wife also met at McGill.
Do you
and,
see, let's say, separation?
The
Coming soon?
country has 3 to 5 million people. It's got tremendous resources in hydro. It could exist. It's much stronger than my little country, Trinidad, or any of those other islands which have no resources. Trinidad has oil, but the others have no resources.
Okay. Well, we'll be right back in just a moment with more of Tim Wilson.
What
and
about my plug?
Oh, later, Tim.
My plug.
Right after this message, so stay with us.
Should your daughter become an advertising woman like Marilyn? This is Marilyn Zelmer, an advertising artist. She draws fashions for department store advertisements. Marilyn works hard in advertising. In her creative world, there never seems to be enough time, but she finds it. Time for a busman's holiday by a bridge while she sketches for fun. Time to teach a class in fashion drawing. Time to be taught in a class on form. Time to try her form in skiing, or to try her luck with a lens. Time to talk at a fundraising meeting for a children's hospital, or over a flaming dessert on a gay night out. And time, sometimes, for a letter home. Yes, Marilyn is a busy girl and a talented one. She earns a good salary, and she should. Of course, Marilyn is not an average girl. But then, is your daughter? Maybe she should go into advertising, too. For information, write your local advertising club.
Room again. The next clip we're going to see is a film shot in Iraq by Tim Wilson. Tim, the section from the clip's going to be from the Iraqi Airways.
Yes.
Could you give sort of
We did a little
background?
news magazine which showed the Arabs, and these were 35 millimeter shown in the theaters with Arabic tracks, showed the Arabs where the oil money was going, that the oil company was taking out, where a little of the oil money was going.
The American oil companies.
It's an international oil company. It was American, Dutch, British, and French, and 5% Mr. Gulbenkian. I wish I had time to tell you about Mr. 5%, as he was known.
Now, I think this clip is only about a minute and a half or so. How long was the entire film?
It would be 20 minutes with 3 or 4 different stories in it. And this was the very first story we shot on Iraqi Airways, which in those days had 3 twin-engine planes and flew from Baghdad to Basra in the south and Kuwait and Kirkuk and I think Tehran and Damascus. We could not go to Tehran and Damascus or Cairo because the British had been thrown out of all of them at that time.
Okay. Quickly, what year was this shot?
52.
In 52. Okay, here's a film clip from Tim Wilson's film on the Iraqi Airways.
تبدأ الطائرة تدريجيا بالسير على خط المطار أولا وإذا ما تأكدت من استقامتها وتوازنها واستلمت إشارة الإذان بالتحليق من برج المراقبة انطلقت إلى أعالي الجو تمرق في غير ركب.
Around the moviola with the violins and flutes and make and I think there may be a shot of a stewardess. That is the very famous mosque of Qad the Main, the Golden Mosque in the center of Baghdad. Very holy. That's Baghdad. The chief pilot at this stage was still British, but the others were all Iraqi. That's crossing the Tigris, and I think that's a sporting club in the background. That's not a bad shot, considering how primitive our conditions were. And the British were not able to reduce 35 to 16 black and white any near as well as the Americans.
I remember seeing a section of this, and there were scenes of actual stewardesses. Is this Iraqi's answer to, in 1952, the commercial airlines of, let's say, the United States?
Oh, to KLM or Air France. They shortly after that film was made, they bought 4-engined aircraft and they flew to London.
Now, I was under the understanding, though, that, and I saw pictures of women acting as stewardesses. I was under the impression that in Iraq...
That was fake. They laughed. They laughed in the theater when they saw that. We asked the chief pilot, who was the Prime Minister's son, if we could have a stewardess, and he said, you realize women do not serve men in this country. It's only men who serve men. Women are shut away. They're in purdah, in effect.
Oh, so that's not a matter of whether men are chauvinistic towards them. They're just not around at all.
Women are only supposed to meet their relatives and their husband. They do not meet anybody else.
How was filming in Iraq in general? Were they receptive to crews coming in, or was there a great amount of American or Canadian input?
But they resisted tight deadlines. We'd go to shoot something, and they'd say, stay to lunch. And we'd say, well, if we stay to lunch, the sun will be in the wrong place when we go to shoot. Stay to lunch and come back tomorrow to shoot. It's the mañana. It's leave it up to Allah. And they're right, of course. I had a big argument with one man as to why he wouldn't come to buy a ticket when the sun, I needed an interior shot, and the sun shone through a slot onto the ticket window of the airline just at the right time. He could not see my, he said, why do you want to do that? And I said, because the oil company is paying me to do that. And he said, why is the oil company paying you to do that? And they just kept asking why. And of course, if you keep asking, why are we doing this show? Why? You get back to the answer to the question, why are we here?
Okay. Hang on a second. We're going to be right back after this commercial. No, later, Tim. We're going to have this commercial, and then we'll be back with Tim Wilson right after this.
Ready for this? Okay. Ready? Let's go. Hang tight.
I ain't going to give you a shot.
Last year, in more than 300 medical units of the Army Reserve, 5,000 men and women gave their country a shot in the arm.
That's all there is to it.
See, now, did that hurt? No, I didn't even feel.
They staffed mass inoculation centers during medical emergencies, set up rehabilitation clinics, and brought badly needed medical and health care to inner city and rural areas all over the country.
That wasn't bad. You're a little anxious to get going here, aren't you?
If you're a nurse, doctor, or medical specialist, you too can help by putting your time and skills to work for your community and your neighbors. As a qualified doctor or nurse, you'll receive an immediate commission.
Wasn't so bad.
For more information, call the Army Reserve Center nearest you.
Tim, we've seen now, we haven't seen the first film which dealt with cultural problems, and we've seen a film that you made in Iraq. Is there any specific film that you would like to make that you haven't made up to this point?
You know, there isn't, Bernie. Films are too expensive and too ulcer-causing, and I've switched to slide tapes, and I'm going to teach a course in simple slide tapes, no more than 80 still pictures, and on the soundtrack you can do anything except sing sound on a slide tape. There's nothing you can't do. And they cost 25 cents a slide and $2 for a cassette, and you can edit them, you can change them between showings. They're not locked into a very expensive test print where it costs you $1,000 to change a word or something. And what would my dream, well, right now my dream slide tape is one on arts and sciences that I'm going to make with Gary Glinsky in my 527 course for summer orientation in my lab
Besides that, what's in the future for Tim Wilson, other than the fact that
I
now you're...
hope to go to Montreal and Toronto. My wife wants me to go south to the Caribbean, but we're taking a bus trip. Owen Shapiro and Norm Keim and Rich Breyer are taking a bus trip, spring break, March 10th to 14th, going to the National Film Board, both in Montreal and Toronto, the CBC, independent filmmakers. A man called Jim Beveridge, who's the man that hired me in Tayo at the Film Board in 45, is coming here to talk to this school on February 26th. He made a film called Grierson. He's just written a book about Grierson. Everything is falling into place.
You've obviously concerned yourself not only here but everywhere else with young filmmakers. Do you have any suggestions for aspiring filmmakers, for people who are trying to get into the trade, at least on the artistic end?
Leave room for accidents. Do it as cheaply as possible. I think the documentary slide tape is about to come into its own.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Glenn Bamman and others are interested in complicated multi-image things, 6 screen. I saw a fantastic one in Boston in the 76 year. 6 screens, 40 carousels.
So you're not telling people, young filmmakers, not to go into film?
No, but start simple. Norman McLaren once said the most important thing for an artist is not his potential, but his limitation. To learn to work within a very simple frame. And Norman McLaren, you will agree, has applied that to himself.
Mm-hmm.
Grierson once said he could only afford one artist, and that artist was McLaren. I'm sorry we haven't had time to talk about McLaren because he's a marvelous
Yeah, it's a shame
man.
because really McLaren holds a special place in the film board, obviously.
Once I slept in his bed. His back was bad, so he had a sheet of plywood.
After hearing about the homosexuals and communists, Tim,
Well, Norman was away at the time, and I had just come back from Baghdad, and Guy Glover said, there's an empty bed in Norman's room. So,
did any of the artistic genius... excuse me.
Oh, dear. You're not supposed to say homosexual on the air?
Well, no. The floor manager has handed me... I'm sorry, Tom. I'm sorry, Tim. I've just been informed that the Hutchins Psychiatric Center has sent some friends over.
I've been to Hutchins.
Who I think you know.
And I'm enrolling as a volunteer.
And they've come to reclaim you.
What the hell is this? What's going on? Look,
Tim, thank you.
Do something about it. I mean,
Tim, thank you for coming. This has been Screening Room. I'm glad that you've been with us.
You are watching the Newhouse Communication Center, Syracuse, New York.